Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sarah Ibrahim, the Associate Director of Stakeholder and Global Engagement in the Office of Generic Drugs, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the Food and Drug Administration. It's a pleasure here chairing the Regulators' Voice, and I think over the past couple of days we've truly learned significant scientific innovations and how that could provide promising contributions to clinical practices and possibly unmet medical needs, right? But there's a triangle or a pyramid to having that patient access. You are scientists, academics, but there's the research, development, and of course where regulations truly come in. To translate that science to patient benefit, the regulatory infrastructure and framework needs to outpace the science that's being developed, right? So early dialogue is key, and it results in the robustness of that development program. And we've heard a lot about the cost of bringing this to the clinic. So having that early dialogue with regulators allows you to develop a program that is safer for you from an investment perspective, but also for the patients who are in need of that medication. So as we start the Regulators' Voice, we're adding the missing piece of the beautiful puzzle that we've been reading about and learning about the past couple of days. I will allow everyone to introduce themselves first, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Hello, everyone. Greetings to all. I'm Rowan Swalim, Senior Scientific Evaluation Specialist at Saudi Food and Drug Administration.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wai. I'm currently working as the Senior Pharmaceutical Assessor at the MHRA in London. I deal with both small molecules and macromolecules, including the siRNA and messenger RNA vaccines. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. And I mean day because we have many colleagues in other parts of the world. And I am João Tavares Neto from Brazil. I work at the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency.
Hello, everyone. Huan Meng from Chinese Academy of Sciences. I guess I'm the minority in this group. I'm not a regulator, but I'm a fundamental scientist, also involved intensively in translational nanomedicine.
And we have colleagues online, so please, Michael, we'll start with you. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Mike Johnston. I'm a research scientist at Health Canada, and I run the Nanomedicines laboratory and the Biologicals and Radiopharmaceutical Drug Directorate.
Thank you. Wenlei?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wenlei Jiang. I'm a Senior Advisor for Innovation and Strategic Outreach at the Office of Research and Standards, Office of Generic Drugs, CDER, US FDA. It's my great pleasure to participate in this Regulators' Voice discussion. I'm looking forward to the discussion with my colleagues around the globe.
Rosa?
Good afternoon. My name is Rosa González Quevedo. I am a Senior Liaison Specialist at the Stakeholders and Communication Division at the European Medicines Agency, and I support different projects on regulatory science, including on patient experience data. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rania?
Hello, I am Associate Professor Rania Al-Hosari from Egyptian Drug Authority. I am the Manager of Technical Advisory Unit and the representative of EDA in IPRP group and the head of the EDA Nano Task Force group. Nice to meet you all.
I think that was a great introduction because as everyone here was attending all of the sessions, our regulators were diligently working on the IPRP Nano Working Group, identifying gaps in international guidances, allowing that data sharing and data surfacing, as well as bridging the gaps across our regulations. So thank you for the diligent work. And we'll go ahead and start with the first question, and I'm sure that's everybody's question right now, is the current regulatory framework adequate for the emerging nanomedicine that we've been listening about for the past couple of days beyond LNPs and liposomal formulations? And we can go down the line and then switch to our online folks.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Well, we believe in nanotechnology in clinical applications for many decades. Although that some nano-based products were previously approved, I think that messenger RNA vaccines shifts the progress for nanomedicines into an accelerated pathway. Subsequently, an improvement of current regulatory framework is still required in order to adapt the upcoming innovations. Honestly, there are challenges in establishing, developing, and revising of the current guidelines owing to the variety of nanomedicines types and diversity of physicochemical properties and toxicological studies. Altogether, stand in the way of establishment of definitive regulations for nanomedicines.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the UK perspective, we already have the innovation pathways for companies, SMEs, or larger companies or researchers to come to us to talk to us about their development program. And in terms of the marketing authorization, we already have the current regulations in place for either a follow-on product as a generic product when you have to compare to the reference product, or as an innovation product, i.e. no one has ever done it before. And that would be submitted in the same way as any other medicinal products. And we will just need to assess it to look at the quality, safety, and efficacy. And of course, nanomedicines are special. And this is why we would need to look at it holistically and to ensure that all the regulatory guidelines are being met and fit for purpose for human usage. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So it seems that the current regulation framework is working to approve new entities and new kinds of products. On the other hand, we will need some adjustments on our concepts. If I give a simple example, we will think, if we approve a new nanoparticle product today, and in 1 year, the company comes to the agency and says, I'm going to change one component of the nanoparticle. So is this a simple excipient change in a simple dossier, or a change for excipient, or this is a totally new entity, and I'm going to need a new registration, a new market authorization from scratch, or is something between? So probably we'll be discussing this topics in the future among regulators and the scientific community. But as we apply that COVID vaccines and other nanoparticles that are already in the market, I see that we can accommodate the analysis. We have the references, we have standards, and we just need a few adjustments.
Okay. So again, I'm not a policymaker, but I can share you what I observed in my country. So number one, nanomedicine is quite robust in China. So I'd like to divide your question into two parts, the lipid and non-lipid. So for the lipid formulation, there is already established a protocol that you can use to submit your submissions. And as far as I know, the agency is also fully aware there are new lipid-based technology for drug delivery purpose, particularly. Take liposome, for example. Previous formulation is like a mono API delivery system. But right now, the agency is releasing guidelines or sort of the document to also consider the ratiometric co-delivery liposomal formulation, which was recently approved in the US. So they are organizing different events to educate the policymakers to learn new lipid-based formulation for mRNA designs, vaccination design, et cetera, et cetera. That's what happened in the lipid portion. So for the non-lipid, since there are many robust activities at least in the research domain, such as nano enzymes, different kind of organic, inorganic materials, a hybrid structure for drug delivery purpose. So I think the agency is indeed communicating with basic scientists to learn what's going on in the field. I'm not sure if they are already have the matured protocol to follow at this moment in time.
Thank you. Mike?
Again, I'm not a policy person or a reviewer, so I can only comment from my experience as a researcher on lipid particles and liposomes. And I think Health Canada looks at novel materials on a case-by-case basis, and we encourage early consultation and discussion with our review groups for products. And in terms of novel materials, I think sharing of information through, in some cases, regulatory-specific forums, such as the Global Summit of Regulatory Science and capacity-building exercises, will help us in dealing with new or novel products, allowing reviewers or policymakers to see what's anticipating what's coming down the pipeline 3 to 4 years or 5 years down the road.
Thank you. Wenlei?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for this question. So besides nano-sized liposome formulation and lipid nanoparticles, actually there are other types of nanomedicines, such as inorganic nanoparticles, polymeric nanoparticles, dendrimers, micelle polymer drug conjugates, or virus-derived vectors, nanocrystals, or cell-derived carriers, and protein-bound nanoparticles. Actually, FDA has approved some of other types of nanomedicines. So a simple answer to your question is yes, I feel like our current FDA regulatory framework is adequate for emerging nanomedicines beyond lipid nanoparticle and the liposomal formulations. But we do understand there may be more innovative nanomedicines arising. FDA recognized these innovative technologies may raise a spectrum of scientific and technical development issues. So actually, we are continuously evaluating and adapt the regulation to keep pace with advancements in these medical technologies. I want to comment on 2 examples. The FDA has published guidance on called Early Development Considerations for Innovative Combination Products. This document provides guidance on development consideration for innovative products that combine device, drugs, and or biologic products. If some investigators have questions regarding which is the appropriate pathway to submit the application, they can refer to this combination product guidance. Another example is on the Emerging Technology Program FDA established. This program focuses on innovative manufacturing approach. So if investigator has some innovative manufacturing approach for certain nanomedicine products and they have questions, they can refer to this program to get more support. Actually, today, FDA has a Nano Day symposium focused on continuous manufacturing of nanomedicine products. I can share the link of this symposium to the meeting participants later. I think there will be recordings available for this Nano Day symposium. So overall, I would say the current regulatory framework is adequate for emerging nanomedicine beyond lipid nanoparticle and liposomal formulations. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Rosa?
Yes, thank you for the question. From the European perspective, we also think the current regulatory framework that we have is adequate. We have not identified any change, not even in the context of ongoing discussions on the revision of the EU pharma legislation. It is true that there have been some stakeholders advocating for a specific pathway for nanomedicines that are evaluated by EMA. Because as you know, in Europe, some nanomedicines can come via EMA at the European level, being granted the marketing authorizations, and others can follow a more national route via a national agency of one of the member states. But both EMA and the national regulatory agencies follows the same standards of safety, efficacy, and quality. And the way dossiers are evaluated, obviously, we have the established standards, and then we take into account the specificities of the product in question. And for more complex follow-on nanomedicines, then if it's not possible to do a full pharmaceutical characterization, we would request additional non-clinical or clinical data to support comparability. So this is, in brief, the EU approach, and I hope it's clear that, yeah, we think the framework as it is currently is adequate. But of course, as Wenlei said, we need to also keep thinking of what's coming in the future, new innovations, and keep an eye on whether at some point there is a need to update the framework. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rania?
Yes, in Egypt, the regulatory concerning nanomedicine is like other drugs in medicine as well as in biological. But recently, we have published the innovative guidelines for innovative drug products so as to deal with the gaps for the innovation, and we deal with it case by case study.
Thank you. So for the upcoming questions, we will not do an in-turn, so please raise your hand if you would like to address the question, and our colleagues on the line to please also use the raise hand option so that I can call on your name. So the next questions will be more of a dialogue, right? So we know that science leads regulations, right? It is the stepping stone to build that regulatory infrastructure. What scientific preparations or gaps are necessary to advance our regulatory framework for nanomedicines more effectively moving forward? Sure.
May I start? So one point that I think, even with the content in this meeting, is that the new generation of pharmacology will bring a new generation toxicology. And especially with undesired immunogenicity, it poses a question to us to keep an eye on immunogenicity. Probably we will experience other kinds of nanoparticles. We will experience the same nanoparticles in different products. We will experience treatments with multiple doses, and this is, and we will experience the field of synthetics exposed to immunogenicity problems that we are used with biologics. So, if I can try to communicate to scientific communities, like, okay, let's start to show regulators what could be changed. Always, that's okay. That's fine. What we already have. In what direction should we be updating the safety framework? So I think this point is one point of concern.
I think whenever I do a panel discussion like this, I like to emphasize that the so-called regulators are also scientists. So the regulations are underpinned by the science, so we can't do them separately. In terms of the science, from our perspective, we would like to have a dialogue with all the researchers whenever they are doing their development and whenever they are not sure what regulations that they need to adhere to or guidelines. We would like to have a conversation with them and making sure that we can support them throughout their development process. And they need to be transparent with the data. What we don't want is when they go into their phase 1 clinical trial and then moving on later, and then we realize, actually, you didn't show us these data, and we could have told you, you need to redesign your clinical trial because you're not looking at the outcome you really wanted to. So these are the communications that I think researchers or investigators need to have with the so-called regulators, one step at a time. And things could change. You're going to change your product design, and then we need to understand why you're changing it and make a comparison. So I always think that is a dialogue rather than seeing us as a barrier. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Yeah, since you mentioned scientists, so I can share you how I view this. So I think it's truly a two-way street. So I think from the scientist perspective, it's our responsibility to communicate with the policymakers, and quite frankly, and sometimes educate the policymakers to letting them know what's the new advancement in the field. I can give you a few examples from the nanomedicine perspective. The traditional, a lot of traditional assays, which was original designed, say, colorimetric assay for small molecules, can be interfered by nanomaterials. So meaning there should be some new assay developed during the drug development process. So there might be new safety endpoints for nanotoxicity of the certain nanomedicine. Take doxorubicin, for example. And in the textbook, we learn they reduce the cardiomyopathy, reduce the heart toxicity. But at the same time, I think in one of the presentation today, people start reporting more PPE, the skin rash symptom. That's the novel toxicological endpoint for nanomedicine. So there's a new assays, new endpoints, and new somethings emerging in the field. I think that it's our responsibility to keep the policymaker updated.
I agree what have been said, that regulations are mainly results of scientific evidences. I believe collaboration and good communication between regulators and scientists will elevate the regulations and regulatory decisions. I think we need supportive studies from scientists that include physicochemical characterization, pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic assessment, process control, scale-up, and reproducibility. All these aspects that ensure quality, safety, and efficacy of the nanomedicines.
Our colleagues on the line, show of hands, who would like to speak? Rosa?
Yes, thank you. No, I would like to contribute as well that an important thing or preparation based on this dialogue between academics, scientists, and regulators is also the need to conduct horizon scanning and also have in place what we think we've done with our regulatory science strategy and our regulatory science research agenda, or research needs as we call it, where based on interviews and questions and dialogue with developers, stakeholders, scientists, we have identified areas also in nanomedicines where there would be a need to look into the future. And yeah, I'll be happy to share these links later with participants.
Thank you. And I see, Rania, your hands are up.
Yes. In Egypt, we have a pre-submission meeting on technical advice for the innovative drug product, in which we can share the experience and knowledge of the researcher with us to know about his research and his point of view, so as to reduce the gap and enhance the submission. I think that is a great step so as to enhance the innovation into our country.
Any additional input before I, Wenlei, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo my colleagues just previously mentioned, like regulators are also scientists. So the regulation is based on science. In terms of the academic scientific preparations to advance regulatory frameworks for nanomedicines, I think we really need to collaborate to develop in-depth knowledge of nanomedicines, understanding some of the nanoparticle design, a mechanism of action, and also understand some of the specific challenges. So the interdisciplinary collaborations, not only collaborations with scientific experts, experts from different fields like material scientists, toxicologists, biologists, clinician, but also engaging with regulatory scientists. I think we all mentioned about some mechanisms the agencies provided to the research investigators about some of the early communications. For example, in the generic field, we do provide like a pre-ANDA meeting to discuss some challenges faced with development of the generic nanomedicines, because these generic nanomedicines are considered as complex products. So we do offer a specific meeting to discuss with the applicants. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Michael?
Sure. As a regulatory research scientist, I kind of sit in the middle of everybody, and my only comment would be, a robust discussions between regulators or reviewers and then the research community, be that regulatory researchers or academic researchers or industrial researchers, to communicate those issues that they're facing and seeing, sort of echoing what's already been mentioned by other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're hearing the same message: is early communication, continuous transparency between developers, researchers, and regulators, right? Because at the end, before being regulators, we were scientists. So we are speaking the same language. It paves the path to my next question, which is, how do our regulators improve and share that research capacity between regulatory agencies? And I think an IPRP Nano working group is a very good example of that, right? But what other pathways can we use? How can we improve that research capacity sharing?
Okay. How can we improve? We've already got representatives from the regulatory agencies in participation with, let's say, the EDQM, WHO, on many of these scientific discussions, where we were helping all these agencies or different organizations to support the development of certain medicinal products. So, for example, during the pandemic, many of the regulatory agencies actually participated in the WHO discussion in order to help maximize the capacity to produce the vaccines for many developing countries, to support everybody in order to get the product out as soon as possible. So how could the regulations be supported to help to develop massive production of these vaccines? One example. And then with the EDQM recently, we've participated actively for the messenger RNA LNPs drafting discussion. And we've got members also participating in writing of these documents with the support from industry, academics, researchers. Everybody come together, as you've heard on, was it day 1 or day 2, where we really are engaging in the discussion. As I speak now, the discussion is going on for the messenger RNA LNP. We've also got many other different avenues where different agencies actually inviting researchers to give talks to the scientists at the regulators to actually share what we think of your technology or how we can resolve some of the challenges together. So I think that's, again, is a dialogue, open dialogue, and we share our ideas and supporting each other. That's my take.
Thank you. Any other input? Okay. Rosa?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree. This collaboration and participation in conference and engaging in scientific dialogue is important. And also one thing we've been doing in Europe for key strategic areas, not only nanomedicine, but now I'm talking in many upcoming areas that are relevant for regulatory work, is engaging into multi-stakeholder dialogue. So not only scientists and regulators, but really trying to bring all impacted stakeholders, including the patient community, which has a lot of expertise and can guide a lot of the discussions, because ultimately they will be the end users of medicines. And also within these forums, we often include our international partners. And we think this is a really important way to foster collaboration with different agencies, but taking into account the whole multi-stakeholder, multi-partner perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
I'd just like to echo that first comment on cross-regulatory agency training and capacity building. Certainly, we've had a good relationship with the FDA in terms of training and presentations between the agencies, and then capacity building between multiple agencies through other regulatory forums, and sort of more of that would be very advantageous to someone like myself who is a researcher. And thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add that at the FDA, we have international programs within every center, and that is tasked with continuous collaboration with other regulators. You can see that visibly with the 31 clusters the FDA is involved in, or you may not be able to see it directly, but we do communicate with foreign regulators on a continuous basis. So we do have those programs within the agency, and I hope you've heard that all of the regulators here are not only open, but they're actively engaged with collaboration with other regulatory agencies. Which brings me to the next one, because research, and now we've shared it as regulators, what's needed so that we can be better harmonized globally? And I think particularly with nanomedicine, it becomes a little bit more convenient, right? Because the regulations are actually being developed as we're going along. So how can we be more effective and efficient in the global harmonization process? Anyone can start.
So I'm a little bit inspired by the story of this city, Basel, because I took a look around and I heard that there was a good combination of bridges and gates. And I think regulation is about to build bridges and gates together with the scientific community. Sometimes we get away only with gates, like you can pass, you can't, you pass, you don't pass. But the need for building bridges is like the main thing. Doesn't make sense you have a gate if you don't have the bridge. So I think building those bridges together in this kind of meetings, and showing and being transparent on our doubts so the researchers can help us. And the industry, the developers, and the society. We must look to the other side of the river and see the agenda from the population as well. So we can make the bridge both ways, and that's it. And that's I want to highlight the importance of this work with other agencies, because regulation is an investment from society, and it's an expensive investment and time-consuming. We take some time from the process because we want to evaluate the products. So our feedback must be really interesting in terms of the investment. In this sense, it's amazing how each agency has experience and knowledge and know-how on all kinds of topics. So working together, we probably will return the investment way much faster than separated.
Thank you.
Okay. Talking about harmonization, the different regulatory agencies just had the meeting on the IPRP on trying to harmonize the product-specific guidance for one of the products. So we recognized the discrepancies or differences between different agencies and how we assess the dossier. So we're trying to discuss and share some of the difficulties in assessing these products, and then we're trying to harmonize the approach that we take, so that hopefully in the future, companies, when they submit the product application to us, everybody will be able to have some sort of similar standards or similar requirements as to the quality, non-clinical, and the safety involved. So rather than just the FDA or the EMA guidances, we want to come together and perhaps having a more harmonized approach across the world, and so helping manufacturers to stick to one particular guidance rather than several different documents where they have perhaps conflicting ideas. So hopefully we can help support that and sharing knowledge and challenges. Thank you.
I strongly believe that the cooperation in the nanomedicine working group under IPRP, as Kawa said, will shine and impact the harmonization of regulations for nanomedicines. In addition, we need further collaboration and effective communications between regulators, researchers, developers, and also health practitioners to consider all factors that might affect development of the nanomedicine products.
Thank you. Rosa, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to second the comment of the harmonization and supporting global development. That's something that Europe is also very supportive on, and also maybe consider as well global multi-stakeholder dialogue. We think for these areas where emerging technologies and not only the scientific aspects, which are relevant, very relevant, but then also the acceptance. And I'm putting here the mRNA vaccines as an example, how early dialogue, including multi-stakeholder engagement, embedded early on, can really facilitate uptake of new novel types of medicines. Thank you.
Wenlei?
Yeah, actually, there are different platforms for global collaboration. For example, the ICH working group and the IPRP working groups, or bilateral or multi-agency collaboration platforms. Here, I just want to mention like IPRP Nanomedicine Working Group is the major platform for international collaboration on nanomedicines among regulators. Actually, we do have a growing membership. Currently, we have 14 agencies in this working group covering like major continents. Just as Kawan mentioned, we are discussing some of the similarity and difference in the nanomedicine regulation among different agencies, and we are working towards reaching scientific consensus regarding some product-specific guidelines. Here, I also want to emphasize the collaboration with the standards organizations. For example, like liposomes, how is liposome defined? What is considered as lipid nanoparticles? We really need to clarify some of these common terminologies among different regulatory agencies. So we need to work with the standards organization closely to clarify these common terminologies. And also some of the information exchange among agencies and also with academic scientists as well as standard organization members are very critical to develop the harmonized guideline among global regulatory agencies.
Yes, since nanomedicine is complicated, I just want to make one quick comment about information sharing. Again, from the research perspective, I can tell you how we propose a new project. I think number one, I want to go to some like an information exchange database that is available for a nano community. The first one I frequently look at is the CN Nanolab underneath the umbrella of NCI at NIH, where they assemble the huge amount of nanomaterial information, including the characterization and biological data points. Very helpful. The second one, I frequently look at the clinicaltrial.gov, use nano plus X to search what's going on there. And number three is I frequently look at the NCL, the National Characterization Lab underneath NIH. Beautiful protocol sharing mechanisms, beautiful consensus guidelines. Since it seems that the IPRP is a major forum to reflect the global collaborations. If any, number one, we want to follow all the confidentiality rules. You don't want to disclose things you don't want to disclose. But getting some publishable consensus to the public, to the nano drug developers, I think that's going to be very advantageous.
It's a great point.
Sorry, Sarah, I've
please.
forgotten one point as well. Some members are also of the BSI, British Standards Institution, where we actually help to draft a technical document to make some standards for nanomedicines. So that's also very important, and there are different working groups where not just regulators are involved, manufacturers, researchers are also involved in drafting these technical documents to help harmonize globally what are these nanomedicine standards that you could adhere to. So setting the benchmark for global researchers, what standards they need internationally. Thank you.
Any additional input? Okay. Well, global harmonization is key, right, for access, especially when you get into the more critical diseases or rare diseases. And it's such a challenge as a developer to look at what jurisdiction should I access. And if they're competing, then one of our patients is not getting access to that medication, right? And we've heard a lot of the venues, whether it's IPRP or ICH, or even internal, like our generic drug cluster or other clusters within the agencies, there is a challenge with information sharing. It's an excellent point, right? So we can share our current thinking, but sometimes it's difficult to share the data that backed up that current thinking, right? So my next question is, how can we really enhance and improve our ability to communicate and share that information with other regulators?
May I speak up?
Sure.
Perfect. There are two things that come to my mind. First, to come to the previous statement about the standardization of terminology. There is a working group especially about the liposome definitions in the ISO TC229. If it's not known yet, it's quite good to look there because they have already created a definition which might be useful because in the ISO, I think 190 countries globally are active. That could be one of those parts which is useful. A second one, fitting exactly to the question you just raised, within the OECD they have this kind of mutual acceptance of data. Maybe it's well known by you, but maybe this would be kind of way forward so that if one of the regulatory agencies came to the conclusion that this is a safe drug or this is a safe product, that others create such kind of mutual acceptance of such decisions. Of course, it's challenging, but maybe this is a way which would be very useful to move forward quicker and to come to the conclusions at the end.
Does anybody want to comment? Someone else. Anyone on the line would like to comment? Michael.
I'll just comment on the first point about the ISO TC229. Certainly a number of regulatory agencies, including Health Canada, does participate either directly or indirectly in that working group. For us, it's through a national participation where our input goes to the national body and then that goes to the working group. So I guess my comment is regulatory agencies are involved in those other standards associations, such as the ASTM as well. Thank you.
Wenlei?
Yeah, I also want to comment. FDA is a member of the ISO working group as well as STM nano working group. Regarding sharing of some of the confidential information, I believe within FDA, we have some agreements with other regulatory agencies. So regarding some of the complex nanomaterials, so we are able to share some of the confidential information with other agencies. I think Sarah probably can comment on this too. We have the generic drug cluster, we have the parallel scientific advice pathway to share some of the confidential information among agencies.
We do have the generic drug cluster, and we have 31 other clusters at the FDA, and they are tasked with sharing information with other regulatory agencies that are members of those particular clusters within the confinement of the confidentiality commitments that exist between FDA and those other regulators. So we do use those venues to share data, confidential information in order to pave the path of that dialogue to bridge, which is a very good word, to bridge our requirements, our regulations and guidances. There's also another pathway because industry always asks, well, how do we get involved, right? And you do have the parallel scientific advice. If you are attempting to develop a product, brand or generic, for FDA jurisdiction as well as EMA's jurisdiction, then you can actually have early dialogue with both agencies concurrently, right? And this was launched almost 2 years ago for the generic drug program, focusing mainly on complex generic drug products, or what EMA would define as hybrid product in many situations. That allows industry to bring forward their development plan early on, so they have that dialogue with both agencies concurrently. And that's how you tell us what the pain points are. This is how we start that discussion and that dialogue and that information sharing that's needed. So we do have those early discussions. It depends on what stage that happens. The earlier you come to us, the earlier we can help you in building a robust development process.
Sorry, to follow on with that point, not sure if many of you are actually aware, but many agencies here actually do share the assessment reports and also share the assessment together. So manufacturers can actually submit the application to multiple agencies and we work on them together. Depends on the framework available. For example, the Orbits, Project Orbits, which involves quite a number of agencies, where the FDA actually takes the lead for oncology products. So many of the nanomedicines actually in that field, so for oncology applications. So it depends on type A, B, C, and then you can distribute those assessment accordingly. So it's quite a neat way to share ideas and share the workload and having input from different countries together and get one license. Of course, we all have the multiple licenses, but then it could be shared and the knowledge can be shared and the assessment can be shared.
Rania? You're muted.
Yes, I totally agree with what you say, and that we do that in Egypt. We have a bilateral collaboration with Zimbabwe and South of Africa. We have signed recently memorandum of understanding, so as to have to share knowledge together and experience, and to rely on each other for our approval for drug.
Were you referring to SAFRA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So just to add something at the theme of reliance, this is always a discussion in jurisdictions, and it's also, there are some political decisions involved, but at the same time, the harmonization of technical requirements, convergence and internalization of the same guidelines is the way that we can pave the way to get the reliance in the future. So I think we are convergent in some direction on having more reliances on dossiers.
And thank you for raising Project Orbis as an excellent initiative that was launched to support development of oncology products across our jurisdictions. And you're correct, FDA does take the lead, but you do have an ability to have that parallel assessment and insight on the assessment from other regulatory agencies. We do have another initiative at the ECMRA that now allows for a single submission of sections of the dossier, and they're doing it as a pilot for now. But I think when you hear the word pilot and regulatory agencies come up with these pilots, that's step one. So they know that this is, hopefully with your help, with your contributions, it becomes a success and it's no longer a pilot, but an ongoing collaboration. Which is perfect, again, to the next. What tools would we require or would we need to increase that regulatory research capacity? Because you mentioned, yes, research is done from the outside, but also our regulatory agencies have their own research capacities and they build the infrastructure based on that. What tools would be required to increase that regulatory research capacity amongst our various agencies? Michael? Michael?
From my perspective, the development of reference materials and reference standards. Our National Research Council recently developed liposome and LNP reference materials, and an expansion of that type of system or that type of material would be, I feel, immensely beneficial to the research community.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Similar to Health Canada, we also have our own research labs where we have reference standards making, and also the NIBSC, which is also part of the MHRA now. They do their own testing of the vaccines, blood products, etc. and they also set up standards with the WHO as a reference state. So again, I want to emphasize, we do want to work collaboratively rather than being so insular and just having our own ideas. We should always share our ideas and always work together so that the patients can get their products faster and more effectively. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. A requirement or a question from the user side is, what have we learned from the COVID pandemic in terms of slimming, accelerating, integrating, development, and regulatory processes? Will we in the future fall back to the old mode of preparing a full package of everything and then have a big car and bringing everything to you, or will this mode of early interaction, early partial assessment and early feedback continue in the future? Will this be the prototypic model for the future, or is this not intended?
That's a great question. I'll let my panelists address that first.
Anybody? Okay. I'll just finish it off and then you can have yours. We are not rolling back to the so-called old model, but we've always had the new model in place, but it just wasn't utilized effectively before the pandemic. But because the pandemic has opened up opportunities for companies to come forward earlier and have that discussion, we are going to be continuously supporting that. The rolling review done by the EU and the MHRA, etc., is not going to stop. We already have the rolling reviews for many different medicinal products, so not just for the COVID-19 vaccines, so I don't see that going to be stopped. The rolling reviews, for those of you who are not familiar with, is basically for companies to submit one set of data at this moment in time, and then a few months later, perhaps, when they gather more data, they submit the other part of the dossier to us. So then the assessors, the assessment team, can continuously looking at those data and raise the questions, and then where the manufacturers, the companies can go back and address those issues and then come back with a set of responses. So to maximize the time we've got in order to get the product out to the patient earlier as required. That system, I don't think it will change. I think it would just be utilized more and more. But that means we need to build up capacities within our regulatory agencies to have the bodies to do those work. Otherwise, we can't cope. If there's only one assessment team to do the whole assessment, we're going to need to build up capacity. That's from my own perspective.
And I think that's a really good question, because the mechanisms were not established for COVID-19. Those mechanisms were already structured in our regulations and how our agencies conduct reviews or approve medications. The fact that it was so visual is because the whole world heard about it, but those mechanisms are already in place. They were just utilized in the proper method and circumstances they were supposed to be in. And I echo the rolling reviews for certain situations are, in fact, something the FDA also does.
Well, I hope that we will not be in another situation where we will be so effective with these rolling reviews, that there will be such a pandemic and such possibility to make all of these tests as we progress into the pandemic. What I was thinking is that probably there should be some kind of hybrid definitions and maybe authorizations related to the nanotechnologies, something as maybe we have for the influenza vaccines. So every year we have a new, basically, strain, and we have to update, and we cannot make a trial for several months because it will be too late. So I think that, sorry, I forgot your name, but you were referring to what will happen if you will change a component of maybe a liposome. And yes, maybe this could be a problem. The nanomedicines, they are evolving. We don't have so many new, but sometimes it's not the same to change maybe some components in the nanoparticle and to use a drug that maybe was licensed many years ago, that is how we have started, or to start to come with new molecular entities, or actually with new active principle inside of maybe the same or a very different nanocarrier. So I think that we have to have like something, an hybrid between a kind of generics and new molecular entities, because sometimes what we will have is a combination of the two. Maybe we have only the carrier that is changing, maybe it's carrying only the active principle, or sometimes both. And what we would like is, of course, is with all of this complexity that it doesn't take forever. This is what you could imagine that everybody is wishing from all of you. Which we know that you are doing your job very well, but we need to ask to you for more.
Who would like to address that? I'm checking. Oh, I'm checking
online
too.
Okay, right, I'll go. Don't shoot me, okay? I'm trying to help. If I understand, what you mean is, if you change one of the components of the nanomedicines carrier, are you able to accelerate that because you're only changing one of the components? And how can you get the license perhaps quicker because you've already done this, let's say, for another product, and you're just changing, let's say, the active, the drug substance. You incorporate a new active ingredient, shall we say.
I was asking also to anticipate all the different possibilities, not think that we are going to change only one component or the other. Is that it is expanding. It's like the supramolecular and the adaptive chemistry that we heard yesterday. We need to have like a kind of adaptive regulation also, because all of these combinations.
Nanomedicines is a complex drug delivery system. If you change one of the components, the physical chemical properties of that drug product are likely to change. Depends on the similarities, you are going to see differences, perhaps on the particle size distribution, how it interacts with the cell membranes, with cells. Does it actually get to the cytosol, endosomes, or is it going to destine to the lysosomes, and then that's it? You can't actually deliver the payload, deliver the drug to the extracellular matrix or inside the nucleus, etc. So there are lots of different components that we need to think of in order to ensure the quality, safety, and efficacy are still meeting the relevant standards that we need. As long as the patients are okay, it's effective, then you get your license. So when you say, do we have a pathway where we have a specific nanomedicines, to be honest, we already got the novel pathway where you submit as an innovative product. And under that framework, we will then look at it individually and using the same standards as we want for any other medicinal products and use the scientific judgment to decide whether this product is fit for purpose. And if you apply the same product to another clinical application, we'll then have another set of new clinical studies to be performed. So I don't see that being any different to any other medicinal product in that respect. In fact, it could be even more complicated because you don't even know the true mechanisms of actions of some of these complex molecules. So that's my perspective. Thanks.
If I can add to that. So I wanted just to bring up that the platform concept is actually something that's starting to come up in regulatory, and it's starting to get applicable in terms of LNPs and mRNA, LNPs for other, but I think that what we need is actually data. A lot more data to actually benefit from regulatory data that has been generated in one program and make it applicable to another program. I think it's too early to maybe do that just yet. We just need more data. And once that happens, for particular platforms, that might be possible. And I know that from the RNA field, that's very actively being pursued, but the answer from regulatory is always the same. We need more data, and it makes absolute sense. We need more data. But once that is generated, probably that's something that can happen, and we can, fine-tune what we need from each specific program in terms of what has been generated in the past.
I think it's a case-by-case situation at that point, right? Because how much data is enough data to give the assessor and the regulator enough confidence that they're safeguarding the patients, right? So, and to your point is, can we extrapolate? Well, sometimes we can, sometimes we cannot, because then you have the risk benefit assessment, if it's slightly leaning to the risk, we're not going to take that risk with our patients.
Absolutely. We're using the COVID-19 vaccine as an example. Using the flu model, the flu vaccine as a model. The flu vaccines, you can just change the active, changing the antigens, and then you can make a vaccine. But the changing the strain itself is actually announced by the WHO 2 times in a year, the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. But you already know the strain to be updated up front, 6 months. But for the COVID-19, we don't even have that information until the very, very last minute. How can you expect the manufacturers and the regulators to be ready within 1 month to get the product launched in order for the autumn vaccination campaign? It's a lot of work, and we don't have the knowledge and experience to do all the analytics. As I'm sure you agree, the vaccines characterization, it's very complex. The analytics, how can you use the orthogonal analytical methods, complementary methods, in order to show that it's comparable, just by changing this messenger RNA sequence by how many nucleic acids, base nucleotides, bases change, will actually still give you the same messenger RNA integrity, same end, the cap, prime, poly-A tail, that's really important as well. It's just lots of issues to consider. We really don't want the patients at the end of the day to have a Daily Mirror headline, the MHRA, the FDA, the EMA did not look at these data properly. We don't want that. So that's one of the benefits and risk analysis that we have to stick to.
I agree, but this has to lower the expectations that sometimes we have the recombination of these changes and immediately get the authorization. It's clear that this will not be the case.
I don't think we're at the stage where we can agree just what is tiny change? Do we have the data to support that argument? It's always data. We need data to back it up, to justify our decision for the public health.
So actually, I just want to add to that. I think for nano formulations and for parenteral formulations, most likely, it's kind of like a commercial-ready formulation right from the stage 1 that we have to prepare. And we are not allowed to do like a lot of changes in the long run. Unlike tablets, where you do a small change and then you have like a wiggle room that you can play with, like this much concentration, there is no, and then you can prove that with the in vitro data, depending upon the class of the drug. I think that's what we don't have a wiggle room in the parenteral product or maybe a nano product. That's something I think it's very challenging. And to add to the point that, yes, one minor change, definitely that will impact the performance. The other thing is about, for example, if there is a change in the manufacturing process, how would you see that? If there is any mechanism from the animal data that we can say that it's not changing the performance what we have seen in the animal data, is it likely to get it kind of like get it approved for clinical studies based on the animal data if you just change the manufacturing process? Say, for example, you have a pre-lyophilized product and now you're going for a lyophilized product. How would you see that change?
And I think that's basically the point, is how much data is enough data to give you the confidence that provides that framework or that wiggle room that you can really maneuver in. And as we are gathering more of that data, we're gaining that knowledge as we go along. I see a question.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for this great discussion. One topic that I hear a lot is that regulatory authorities should work together and show transparency towards each other. But I imagine, let's say, a scenario where drug approval has a certain risk involved, but it is a necessity to make a decision. Would it be best if regulatory authorities come together and make a decision, like a harmonized decision? Or would it be okay for, let's say, for certain authorities to wait because of the certain risks and wait for a different authority to actually take a leading role and approve the drug?
I don't think we have that type of discussion. So when we do come together, it could be triggered by a public health crisis, like we've done in recent history, but it can also be for the public well-being, right, and the collaborative approach, like Project Orbis. I don't believe that any regulatory agencies in its conscience would take the risk with its people first while others watch. So I think that's a tricky way. But do we agree on many situations? Yes. And do we disagree on others? Absolutely. But that's science, and that's the regulatory framework that we work under, and we do share significant safety data with each other. In fact, if you have a safety signal in any country, rest assured that the rest of the countries will hear about it.
I just want to make one quick comment to your questions. I think that highlights the necessity to perform the clinical nanotoxicology research. If we look at what's happening for the ADC, for example, the recent approval of DS2, A2, the HER2 ADC antibodies, there are famous geographical toxicity in, if I remember correctly, it's Japanese populations. And for the COVID lipid nanoparticles, and there is a region-specific side effect, particularly the pseudo allergy response. So I think we do have a nanotoxicology program in this meeting. I think maybe in the future people should pay more attention from the clinical nanotoxicology perspective to address some geographical specific outcome. That's the 2 cents.
And also the benefit and risk in different countries may be different, and that's why sometimes we may end up making a different decision when we compare different regulatory authorities. Let's say the population, the indication for the United States, where you may have a subset of population where you have a high prevalence of certain condition, where another country don't, then the risk and benefits may change. So that's what we look at.
Yeah, and it's important to raise that different jurisdictions also have different laws that are above the agencies. It gives me the opportunity to say that in Brazil we have right now a legislative bill on nanotechnology who established the whole framework for nanotechnology in Brazil. So it's broader than health science, it's the whole nanotechnology. If this bill comes to become a law, those interested in the Brazilian situation, market, or anything should be paid attention. We could lead to situations on having the same technical decisions in the future.
I didn't really want to interrupt this discussion, but I wanted to come back to a point that was made earlier, where it was said that the WHO releases the virus that they believe are going to be infectious. Actually, the companies that make a lot of these vaccines, they can already predict ahead of time which strains are going to be the one that the WHO is going to release, because, well, they already have to start developing these kind of things. And I'm actually quite curious what you think. Could you maybe use this technology to predict which other diseases, corona or maybe some other infectious diseases, could already be released earlier, so the development of these vaccines and other products can already be enhanced and sped up?
Anybody want to address that?
I can follow up with that one. Basically, we would not want the manufacturers to initiate that. The reason for that, if you imagine you've got manufacturer A proposing one particular strain, manufacturer B proposes another strain. Which one are we going to go for? So ideally, we would like the WHO to be the organization to make that decision, so that globally we have one particular strain for whatever region that they recommend. And we do have expert committees at the WHO where many different, territories actually sit in to discuss what is the antigenic shift that is happening Do we actually eliminate this original strain altogether now because it's now shifted so far away from the original strain? Or do we actually include the original strain? And so manufacturers can have a concise, one definitive answer, and then they can do their manufacturing, and then they can submit the data to the regulatory authorities. But what we are currently experiencing is we don't have that leadership at the moment, but we are working on that, and the WHO is likely to be the organization to lead in selecting the strain for the COVID-19 anyway. They are doing it for the flu, and they will be hopefully doing it for the COVID-19. And we are anticipating that for next year, so that manufacturers are not going to be manufacturing these products at risk, which is also a risk to them because they manufacture one strain and then waiting for the WHO or the regulatory authorities to make that decision, which is a cost and also wasting time and effort. So we want a more streamlined approach, perhaps, globally, and so that everybody can benefit, and targeting and focusing on the products that are in need for the global population.
May I comment on that? I'm a little bit puzzled now, because 5 minutes ago you said that you need to take into account the geographical differences. And now you say that the global, the WHO, should do one selection for all. So maybe I just misinterpreted now. But for me, it's a little bit exactly like, okay, for some reasons we need to do it geographically independent to maybe, deal with the specifications. But for others, we don't need to deal with the specifications and one fits all. So how do you see this point?
I'm so sorry, I better clarify. We would like the WHO to be the decision maker, the organization to select the particular strain for whatever regions. Perhaps in Africa, there's one particular strain that is actually more prevalent. Therefore, they need that particular strain to be included in the vaccine. Or perhaps in the US, another strain. But they are the ones to make that decision so that the manufacturers for the different regions can manufacture that, like the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere for the flu, for the strains. Sorry. Thanks for the
Any other questions from the audience? All right. Some maybe closing remarks? What our immediate priorities should be? This is open to anyone, of course, online or in person. Based on actually everything that we've heard in the past almost 3 days now, what would our priorities be in the upcoming years, both as regulators as well as researchers and scientists? Oh, this is actually a question open for the audience as well. What should our priorities be?
Maybe I'd break the ice.
Sure.
Maybe first prioritization could be to clearly set some minimal requirements which you want to do together. So that you say, okay, this we want to achieve in the next year or in the next 2 years, that these things we harmonize between our 12 on the screen now, or 30 or 40 or whatever group. That could be a first start.
Wenlei?
I just want to share some survey results from the IPRP Nanomedicine Working Group, and also some of the follow-up discussion. I would say, like, due to the success of COVID-19 vaccines based on lipid nanoparticle technologies, we expect actually more lipid nanoparticle applications or other nanomedicine applications. Based on the survey among IPRP Nanomedicine Working Group members, not all agencies actually have review experiences with these applications. So I think a training on regulators is something the working group will focus on particularly like the lipid nanoparticle applications. Another thing actually we talk about is about the harmonization of generic nanomedicine approval standards. I think that was also raised in our survey response. It looks like different regulatory agencies have different approval standards for generic and follow-on nanomedicines. So that's something actually the working group is going to work together to develop some scientific consensus regarding generic nanomedicine development. Yeah, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I would like to echo what Wenlei had mentioned about today being Nano Day. In the FDA, there's a training that started 12:30 New York time. If you've missed it, SBIA does have a website that keeps all of their recordings. So again, for the sake of transparency and knowledge sharing, it does discuss continuous manufacturing for nano formulations, and that would definitely be beneficial for many. On behalf of everyone here, thank you so much for our panelists, and thank you, everyone.